At our weekend family dinner, my younger sister said, "Starting tomorrow, my boyfriend and his parents are moving in here. If you have a problem with that, you can move out." I just smiled and nodded. The next morning, they arrived with 3 moving trucks packed with all their belongings. Hours later, when they tried to step through the front doors, they called me in an absolute panic. "What the hell did you do?" "My name is Daphne Finch. I'm 38 years old, and I bought my $4 million villa in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah, with 16 years of my own hard work in commercial real estate. Every single brick of that 5,000 square foot house belongs to me." Yet my 26-year-old sister stood in my dining room and handed my home over to a family of grifters who hadn't contributed a single dime. She assumed I would just back down, hand over my keys, and walk away quietly. They thought they had won. But what was waiting for them inside that foyer made my sister literally drop her keys onto the cold marble floor. And if you believe no one should ever take your hard work for granted, hit subscribe right now before we go one step further. None of this makes sense unless I tell it from the beginning, because you need to understand how a woman loses a house. She never actually lost, and what was waiting on the other side of that door when they unlocked it. To understand how my own home was turned against me, you have to go back to the losses that left that giant house so empty. That magnificent 5,000 square foot villa perched on the scenic hills of Federal Heights in Salt Lake City was never meant to echo with silence, yet that was all it offered me after the final chapter of my family history closed. A decade prior, my father, Arthur Finch, suffered a sudden cardiac event that took him away from us before he could ever enjoy his retirement. That profound absence carved a permanent scar into our household, leaving my mother, Stella Finch, to carry the emotional weight of raising our family alone, while I poured every ounce of my energy into building a career in commercial real estate. For 16 grueling years, I traded personal milestones for corporate transactions, working 60-hour weeks until I finally secured enough capital to purchase the property of our dreams. But life possesses a cruel sense of timing. Just as I handed over the final wire transfer for the grand estate, Mom was diagnosed with an aggressive illness that steadily drained her vitality over the course of 3 agonizing years. I spent every available hour juggling major property acquisitions by day and sitting beside her hospital bed by night, desperately trying to buy back time with money. She passed away in the upstairs master bedroom just 2 years ago, leaving behind a pristine sanctuary filled with Italian marble panoramic mountain views and an unbearable emptiness that no amount of success could ever cure. Struggling to navigate the overwhelming grief of losing both parents, I found myself wandering through cavernous hallways that felt more like a museum than a home. That was the vulnerable window of time when my younger sister, Roxy Finch, came back into my daily life. At 26 years old, she had spent her entire life shielded from the harsh financial realities I faced during my early 20s. Following Mom's passing, she expressed profound loneliness in her modest downtown apartment, claiming that living alone in the wake of such a tragedy was destroying her mental health. Driven by a misplaced sense of older sister protection and a desperate desire to restore some warmth to those echoing rooms, I opened my doors wide and invited her to move into the estate rent-free. My intention was simple and pure, rooted in the innocent belief that family would naturally reciprocate loyalty and respect. I wanted us to heal together, sharing quiet evenings by the stone fireplace and rebuilding a sense of sisterly connection that our hectic lives had fragmented. For the first few weeks, the arrangement felt comforting, bringing a youthful spark of life back into the property. However, luxury estates have a peculiar way of shifting human behavior, especially when someone is handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar lifestyle without ever having to sweat for a single dollar of it. Roxy quickly adapted to the immense square footage, treating the custom furnishings and state-of-the-art kitchen as though they had always been her birthright, rather than the fruits of my grueling 16-year grind. The true fracture point materialized precisely 4 months after she unpacked her boxes, heralded by the arrival of a man named Broderick Vance. At 30 years old, he carried himself with an unwarranted arrogance, introducing himself during his very first weekend visit as a freelance financial consultant, whose brilliance was supposedly just waiting for the right market breakthrough. In reality, Broderick was nothing more than an ambitious parasite with expensive tastes, empty bank accounts, and an uncanny talent for manipulation. Under the guise of spending quality time with my sister, he began staying over on most weekends, then gradually extended his visits to entire weeks, and finally brought his entire wardrobe over without ever uttering a single word of discussion or asking for my permission as the sole homeowner. Within a short span, Broderick established a permanent residency in our household, treating my hard-earned investment property like a luxury hotel, where all expenses were miraculously covered by an invisible ghost. He never once contributed a single penny toward the property taxes, utility bills, or even the groceries filling the pantry. Instead, he spent his afternoons lounging by the heated pool, smoking imported cigars on the terrace, and whispering poison into Roxy's ear. He systematically cultivated her natural tendency toward entitlement, convincing her that my success was merely a family resource meant to be plundered, rather than an individual achievement earned through relentless discipline. Sitting across from them at the dining table, I watched helplessly as my own sanctuary was quietly subverted from within, paving the way for a storm that I was only beginning to foresee. 6 months after Broderick moved in, the basic boundaries of personal space in my home completely vanished. What began as minor inconveniences quickly escalated into an overt takeover of the main living areas, driving a deep wedge between my sister and me. Returning home from demanding commercial property negotiations, I increasingly felt like an unwanted intruder in the very sanctuary I had spent 16 years financing. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I walked into the ground floor wing expecting to access my home office. Instead, I found construction workers gutting the interior, ripping down my mahogany bookshelves, and hauling out my professional filing cabinets to make room for a massive custom gaming screen and a pool table. When I demanded an explanation, Roxy casually informed me that Broderick needed a dedicated lounge space to entertain potential financial clients during evening hours. She claimed that my private workspace was an unnecessary waste of square footage, insisting that I could easily manage my real estate operations from a corner of the master bedroom upstairs. Broderick merely smirked from the leather couch, sipping my vintage whiskey while offering an insincere apology about forgetting to send me a text notification prior to bringing in the renovation crew. I stood there watching my hard-earned quiet space transformed into a noisy entertainment hub, realizing that reasoned communication with them was no longer possible in this household. The audacity of their entitlement reached its absolute peak 2 weeks later, with a cruel, unforgivable act directed at our longtime housekeeper, Essie Bishop. Essie had been an irreplaceable pillar of support for our family, serving devotedly for 18 years and caring for Mom through her agonizing final months with immense tenderness and grace. She knew every inch of that property and treated my family with a level of loyal dedication that extended far beyond a paycheck. Yet, simply because Essie gently asked Broderick to clean up his persistent mess in the main kitchen area, Roxy took severe offense on her boyfriend's behalf. Without consulting me or having the courage to speak face-to-face, Roxy summarily terminated Essie's employment via a cold, heartless voice message. When Essie came to me in tears showing me the audio message where my sister accused her of disrespecting the new structure of the home, my heart shattered. Rather than sparking a screaming match that would achieve nothing except validating their toxic behavior, I handled the situation with quiet, decisive action behind the scenes. I immediately stepped in, apologizing profusely for the outrageous treatment she had endured at the hands of my ungrateful sister. I made sure Essie received 3 full years of severance pay, and I quietly set up a private, fully funded retirement annuity that guaranteed her complete financial security for the rest of her life. She had given her best years to our family, and I refused to let her suffer because of my sister's moral decay. To maintain my own mental peace and focus on my demanding career without constant daily confrontation, I made a calculated tactical concession. I moved my personal belongings out of the main residence and relocated into the fully equipped carriage house situated at the rear of the property. This detached guest house was completely self-contained, featuring its own private entrance, modern kitchenette, and secure access gates. It allowed me to completely isolate myself from the chaotic lifestyle, endless late-night parties, and disrespectful attitudes taking over the main villa. From that moment on, I lived independently at the back of my own estate, silently observing as Roxy and Broderick pushed their luck to absolute extremes, while blissfully unaware of the financial trap they were digging for themselves. It was a freezing Thursday evening in late November when my endurance finally crossed its ultimate breaking point. A harsh winter storm had swept through the Salt Lake Valley, dusting the Wasatch Mountains in thick snow and driving temperatures well below freezing. To mark the occasion, Roxy insisted on hosting a formal family dinner in the main dining room, inviting me over from the carriage house, under the false pretense of reaching a peaceful resolution regarding our household arrangements. The atmosphere inside was suffocatingly tense, heavy with the artificial warmth of the stone fireplace and the sharp smell of roasted meat. Halfway through the meal, Roxy set her wine glass down with a deliberate click against the polished oak table and dropped a bombshell without a single trace of hesitation or remorse. She nonchalantly announced that Broderick's parents, Wilbur Vance and Nettie Vance, had just finalized the sale of their modest residential property down in Provo and were officially moving into our villa full-time. Roxy spoke as if this grand relocation was a settled matter, explaining that Wilbur and Nettie intended to occupy the master suite on the second floor while transitioning into their quiet retirement years. When I sat up and pointed out that 4 strangers taking over my private residence was completely unacceptable, my sister offered a chilling, cold-hearted ultimatum. She looked me straight in the eye and stated that if I had any issues living alongside Broderick's family, I was more than welcome to pack my bags and rent a small apartment elsewhere in the city. The sheer audacity of being evicted from my own $4 million property left me momentarily speechless, but I chose not to indulge them with an emotional outburst. Later that night, around midnight, I walked back toward the main house to retrieve an important real estate contract I had left inside the side study. As I stepped quietly onto the heated stone patio near the rear glass doors, I heard muted voices emanating from the dimly lit living room. Broderick had placed his phone on speaker mode while talking directly to Nettie, with Roxy sitting closely beside him, listening in. Curiosity kept me frozen in the shadows, and what I overheard next chilled my blood far more than the freezing November wind sweeping across the snow-covered lawn. Nettie was eagerly asking over the line whether the groundwork had been laid to permanently clear me out of the legal title. Broderick reassured his mother, detailing a calculated psychological smear campaign they were quietly assembling against me. They planned to exploit my recent emotional grief over losing Mom, manufacturing false reports to local authorities claiming I was experiencing severe mental instability and unpredictable violent outbursts. Their strategy was to petition the local court for an emergency civil restraining order to bar me from stepping foot on the property grounds. Alternatively, if the court order faced delays, they intended to use staged behavioral claims to legally commit me into a high-end private psychiatric facility located in the distant suburbs, effectively granting them full physical control of the estate. Standing in the freezing darkness outside that window, a strange, terrifying sense of absolute clarity washed over me. The hurt and betrayal that had weighed down my chest for months instantly evaporated, replaced by a razor-sharp, ice-cold resolve to protect what was rightfully mine. I did not barge through those doors, I did not scream at them, nor did I shed a single tear over their despicable treachery. Instead, I turned around, walked silently back to my quarters, and opened my laptop to review the complete legal portfolio of the estate. I realized then that trying to reason with parasitic narcissists was an exercise in futility, and the only logical path forward was a swift, total, and permanent liquidation of the entire property that would leave them with nothing. Early the next morning, before the sun could even rise over the Wasatch Mountains, I made a call that changed everything completely. I met directly with my private attorney Everett Cole at his downtown firm to review the legal documentation for the Salt Lake Villa. Having handled all my corporate transactions for over a decade, Everett carefully examined the original deed, confirming beyond any doubt that I possessed exclusive sole ownership of the property. Because my sister had never signed a lease, paid rent, or contributed financially to the purchase, she held no legal tenancy rights or ownership claim whatsoever under Utah state law. Knowing that trying to evict them through standard civil courts would draw out a painful battle, I instructed my attorney to execute a far more radical legal maneuver. Leveraging my extensive corporate network, I initiated contact with a major commercial real estate management group that had been eager to acquire luxury residential parcels in Federal Heights for institutional redevelopment. Within 48 hours, we negotiated a complete all-cash purchase agreement for the $4 million estate, bypassing the lengthier mortgage contingencies of traditional residential buyers. The corporation agreed to take on the property as is, accepting full responsibility for securing physical possession after closing. The speed of the transaction was breathtaking, effectively converting my physical real estate asset into liquid capital before my family even suspected a thing. With the liquid proceeds clearing into my corporate account, my first emotional priority was ensuring that those who had shown genuine loyalty were properly rewarded and protected. I immediately allocated a portion of the sale funds to purchase a comfortable, fully furnished 2-bedroom condo in downtown Salt Lake City for Essie. I placed the clear title of the condo directly in her name as a tangible expression of my deep gratitude for her 18 years of selfless service to our family. Seeing her tears of relief when I handed her the keys gave me immense peace, knowing she was safely settled far away from the ongoing family toxicity. With that moral duty fulfilled, Everett finalized the institutional closing documents and officially dispatched a formal legal notice directly to the primary residence. The certified letter explicitly stated that the underlying property had undergone a complete change of corporate ownership, issuing an absolute vacate order for all current unauthorized occupants prior to the designated deadline. 2 days later, a certified process courier delivered the heavy manila envelope to the front door of the main house. Broderick happened to answer the door, signing his full signature on the digital delivery confirmation receipt without fully recognizing the legal weight of the document in his hands. Upon opening the notice and reading the strict eviction language drafted on official legal letterhead, he suffered a severe lapse in judgment driven by his own hubris. Believing that I was merely orchestrating an elaborate bluff to frighten them out of the house, Broderick decided to hide the letter entirely from Roxy and his parents, Wilbur and Nettie. He quietly slipped the document into his desk drawer, convinced that my threats were hollow and that no court would ever enforce an eviction against family. Unaware of the impending crisis, Roxy and Broderick continued their extravagant lifestyle inside the main house, spending their days selecting high-end interior finishes and planning lavish dinner parties for their incoming guests. They moved through the spacious rooms with absolute confidence, believing that their calculated plot to manipulate my legal status was progressing smoothly toward total victory. Little did they realize that the clock on their stay was ticking down rapidly with every passing hour. While they were busy celebrating their imagined victory, the commercial corporate entity was quietly finalizing their operational logistics to claim full physical possession of the estate, setting the stage for a devastating reality check that none of them saw coming. On a snow-covered Tuesday morning in mid-December, 3 massive moving trucks from the city of Provo pulled up the long driveway toward the main entrance. The heavy diesel engines rumbled through the quiet mountain air, their tires crunching loudly over the freshly plowed snow as they maneuvered into position. Wilbur and Nettie stepped out of the lead vehicle with wide, triumphant smiles. wrapping their heavy coats tightly around themselves while marveling at the sheer grandeur of the Stone estate. They had sold their modest home down south, packed up every single piece of their lifelong possessions into those trailers, and were now ready to claim their promised spot in luxury. Broderick walked down the front steps with an inflated sense of pride, motioning for the movers to begin unloading the heavy wooden furniture directly into the foyer. However, as the heavy oak double doors swung open, the joyful family reunion ground to a sudden breathtaking halt. Standing prominently inside the expansive foyer was not a welcoming committee of family members, but a formidable line of corporate representatives waiting in silence. Everett stood right at the center, holding a thick leather briefcase alongside the senior asset manager of the commercial corporate entity. Positioned quietly near the grand marble staircase were two uniformed local police officers who were present solely to ensure civil order during the formal property handover. Next to them stood a crew of professional locksmiths and security technicians equipped with commercial electronic keypads and heavy-duty seal tags ready to secure the premises. Nettie froze on the threshold, her warm smile instantly dissolving into confusion as she looked around at the stern faces occupying the room. Broderick felt his heart drop into his stomach, his arrogant posture collapsing the moment his eyes locked onto the official legal badges pinned to the officers' jackets. Before anyone could utter a word, Everett stepped forward and officially introduced the corporate management team as the sole legal owners of the physical property. He calmly produced the recorded deed transfer, explaining in clear terms that the residential title had been fully acquired through a finalized corporate purchase agreement. Roxy, who had just rushed down from the upper floor in her silk robe, gasped audibly as the absolute truth crushed her grandiose expectations. She stood utterly paralyzed on the polished Italian marble floor, her fingers trembling so violently that her keyring slipped from her grip, clattering loudly against the cold stone surface. Everett politely informed the astonished group that all unauthorized occupants had exactly 60 minutes to gather their personal clothing items and vacate the private premises immediately. The commercial management group was taking physical possession, and any lingering presence would be treated as illegal criminal trespassing under state law. Wilbur began shouting in sheer disbelief, demanding to know where his son's financial authority had gone, while Nettie clutched her husband's arm in a state of hyperventilating panic. The three moving trucks parked outside, filled to the brim with their entire life's belongings, suddenly had nowhere to go. Throughout this chaotic confrontation, I remained standing quietly near the side entrance, wrapped in my tailored wool coat, with my luggage already safely loaded into my sedan. I stepped toward my sister, picked up the dropped keyring from the floor, and gently placed it into the hand of the lead corporate representative. Looking at Roxy and Broderick one last time, I offered a calm, subtle smile that contained neither anger nor pity, but simple closure. Without speaking a single word to the stunned group, I turned around, walked down the granite steps, and slipped into the driver's seat of my vehicle. As I backed out of the driveway and set off down the snowy mountain road toward my new penthouse downtown, my phone on the dashboard lit up frantically with an incoming call from Roxy. I tapped the speaker button just in time to hear her voice screaming through the digital line in total desperation. "What on earth did you just do?" 18 months have passed since the day those keys dropped onto the marble floor. The harsh reality of that freezing winter morning set off an irreversible chain reaction of consequences that completely shattered the illusions of everyone involved. Having sold their family home down in Provo, Wilbur and Nettie found themselves utterly stranded without a permanent roof over their heads, forced to spend a huge portion of their remaining savings on a cramped, overpriced rental apartment on the noisy outskirts of the city. The financial stress and humiliation quickly tore the Vance family apart, destroying their quiet retirement dreams and exposing the fundamental greed that had driven their actions. Broderick's elaborate scheme to secure a luxurious estate ended up ruining his own family's financial stability, leaving them burdened with mounting debt and bitter regret. The toxic relationship between Roxy and Broderick naturally imploded under the weight of mutual resentments and endless legal mudslinging. Broderick was furious at Roxy for failing to secure any portion of the estate, while Roxy blamed him for hiding the official legal notice and ruining her reputation. Their petty arguments escalated into expensive court battles over shared personal debts, ending their engagement in a storm of hatred and permanent bitterness. For the first time in her pampered life, Roxy faced the cold, unyielding reality of adulthood without my financial safety net backing her up. I completely severed all communication channels, changing my personal phone numbers and blocking every access point to ensure she could never reach me again for financial assistance. Deprived of my monetary support, Roxy was forced to leave her lavish lifestyle behind and take on multiple low-wage retail jobs just to cover her monthly rent and basic groceries. Standing behind a commercial sales counter for long, exhausting hours taught her the grueling value of an honest dollar, a lesson she had willfully ignored while taking my generosity for granted. Meanwhile, the buyers of my former villa successfully converted the sprawling estate into an exclusive commercial corporate retreat center, altering the floor plans to suit their business needs. The home where my parents had spent their final years was now a thriving hub of institutional commerce, completely detached from the personal drama that had once poisoned its grand halls. With the substantial liquid proceeds generated from the property sale, I expanded my commercial real estate portfolio into growing markets across the region, building a secure and highly lucrative financial empire. I settled into a stunning high-rise penthouse overlooking the city skyline, enjoying the profound peace and freedom that came with total independence. Essie lived comfortably nearby in her warm downtown apartment, frequently joining me for weekend dinners where we fondly remembered Mom's genuine warmth without any lingering bitterness. I finally built a life grounded in authenticity, surrounded only by people who possessed true integrity, never once looking back at the toxic storm I had left behind. This journey serves as a powerful reminder that arrogance, greed, and the betrayal of true loyalty will inevitably lead to one's own undoing. Those who attempt to exploit the generosity of others eventually construct their own downfall, while standing firm in self-respect and making brave decisions will always pave the way toward long-term peace and prosperity. Thank you so much to all of our incredible viewers for staying with us until the very end of this story. Your continuous support means the world to us, and we would love to hear your thoughts on how this resolution unfolded, so please feel free to share your comments below.